Okay. So we were discussing all of these activities of British in the subcontinent last week, and how they were trying to expand their control through different battles and by capturing different lands of the subcontinent, namely Bengal through the Battle of Plassey and Buxar. They had they had different battles with the rulers of Mysore in the Anglo-Mysore Wars in Punjab and Sindh and Afghanistan. So the British had sort of captured most of these Indian lands through these battles with the Indians. And this is how their control was gradually expanding the subcontinent as well. But then the British government it realized that there are some problems with the anarchy EIC is sort of conducting in India, where they were only allowed to trade. They had sort of interfered in the political matters of subcontinent. Having no problem with this, the British government took direct control of political affairs of the subcontinent and only allowed EIC to remain a trading body. And this control was taken from EIC to the British government in the India Act of 1784, where they set up a civil service exam for different Indians who wanted to be a part of the in government, and there were different commanders in chief, provincial governors who were appointed as the heads of the military and the heads of the administrative bodies. So this charter that was presented in 1833. It renewed East India Company's uh, agreement for the next 20 years. Commercial activities were closed down. It was just made into an administrative body for British Indian possessions. That meant that all of the things that EIC traded with, those things were sort of put under the control of EIC, and it just became an administrative body of all of those possessions. Nothing more than that. Its trade links were also closed down with China. All of the English who wanted to settle in India were allowed to settle freely. The Indians were not allowed to settle in the UK. The administration was now under one control. This entire colonization was legalized now, and British were the official colonizers of India. The significance of this Act of 1833 was that it was the first step in centralization of India's administration, which meant that India was now under one control, one central body, which was the British government. They were the official colonizers of India. East India Company's commercial activities were now closed down, and they were just administrating India. The codification of laws under Macaulay. Macaulay was a viceroy in India at that time, and certain laws were passed that sort of dealt with education and social affairs of the subcontinent. And these laws of Macaulay were very important reform of 1833. Um, Indians in government service, the setup of civil service and letting Indians in the civil service was another step, was another important step taken by the British government. Although it meant nothing because the Indians were still not able to they were not able to take part in any of the political affairs because of the criteria of the civil service. They had to learn English. They had to take that exam in English, which was extremely, extremely difficult for the Indians. So the setup of government service was just a power show, nothing more than that. Um, Guys, any questions so far?
No, sir.
Okay. Doctrine of Lapse. Then this another reform that was introduced by the British government in 1852 was the Doctrine of Lapse. Um, it was a policy that stated it was introduced by Governor General Lord Dalhousie, and it stated that any Indian state, independent Indian state, without a natural hire or without a natural owner, would go under the ownership of British government. Now that meant if, let's say, any landlord died without having a natural hire, their land would go under British control directly. Nagpur, Satara, Jhansi, these lands were taken over by the British through this policy. It was just a power show. Nothing more than that, because the British, they were just looking for reasons to capture more lands. And instead of giving power to maybe people who were close to the landlords, for them to decide who would be taking control of the lands, British government was directly taking possession of those lands, which was a very illogical act. So this is another example of how the control of the government was expanding in the subcontinent through battles, through policies, through extremely difficult criteria of civil service. Um, the British government was sort of expanding the control. Vernacular Acts of 1878. When all of this was happening after 1852, like the next 30 years were extremely difficult for the British government because the Indians were uprising. The Indians saw that this entire power show is useless, and the British are just trying to colonize India. In fact, they already had, but they were simply making useless policies to take control of more lands, and they were sort of intruding in the political and social affairs of the subcontinent. Vernacular acts were basically an act to curb the freedom of the people of subcontinent because people started protesting. They started uprising against the government. And in 1878, the British government passed this vernacular acts that put a ban on Indian freedom of Indian press, uh, publishing any relevant criticism to the British government policies. Newspapers would only contain pro-British articles. News would not be against the British. No Indians could manufacture, sell, possess, or carry firearms. English were allowed to do that. Indians were not allowed to carry any weapons without license. Dramatic Performance Act was also part of it that sort of said that no dramas or shows would be made against the British. So they were trying to now control the narrative by putting a ban over press, a ban over different performances, ban over licensing of firearms and weapons, um, trade embargoes over the Indians, just to limit their control, limit their participation in any activity that would go against the British, that could potentially harm the British narrative. And so this was again a control tactic, which was imposed on the Indians because British obviously they didn't want to uh, sort of entertain any criticism over their policies because they knew they were wrong, obviously, and they were just trying to control the narratives now. All right, guys, clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Perfect. Now, this next question is about how the British drained India's wealth. Now, apart from expanding their control, the next step was once their control was expanded, they were simply trying to drain India's wealth by imposing heavy taxation, by trading crops and jewels, by trading cotton, tea. They were buying it very cheaply in India, selling out on very heavy prices in the UK. Um, it resulted in a lot of famines, economic collapse of Indian people because they were simply out of all the trading activities. The British had taken over the trading monopoly of the subcontinent, and the Indians had very little power left. Now this question is a sort of a summary of the British expansion. Why did EIC become interested in India during the 17th century? So we're looking at the reasons for the British involvement, that why they were so interested in expanding the control in India. And you guys can you will for a 7 mark response, we always write 3 reasons, guys. So 3 paragraphs for 3 reasons, and each reason has to be fully explained with one analysis at the end. Look at these bold lines, they're the analysis of all of these reasons at the end of each paragraph. So EIC became interested. If you look at these 3 reasons, one of the reasons could be the wealth, immense wealth of India. All right. You can say that, look at this reason. You guys can read through it, that the British um, thought that if they traded with India, they would earn a lot of profit due to its resources and crops such as jute, cotton, indigo, gypsum, and they became involved due to the profitable trade and the rich resources and the wealth of India. Then you can talk about how the spices, the British wanted, spices are very important in preservation of meat. Um, and They used to buy spices from Portuguese earlier, but now because India was another market for them, it was a lot more accessible through sea and through land. So they started trading spices with India for heavy profits. Another factor could be EIC's ambitions. India was filled with wealth and resources that could be traded to earn profits, while on the other hand, the rulers of India were weaker. You can talk about how the Indian rulers, the Mughals, and all of these sub rules of subcontinent did not match the unity of the British, the strength and the power and the technology the British had at that time, which is why it was so easy for the Indians to be defeated, so easy for the British to take over all of these very important provinces of India. All right. So you guys will have to write these three reasons in the way they're written over here. Again, you need to, first of all, mention the reason, explain it, and then analyze it. Follow the same format for the three reasons, and you'll be done with this 7 mark response. Any questions?
No, sir.
Are you sure? There's, and then you can talk about how the British government took control from EIC, the early 19th century. Charter, the India Act, the Act of Parliament. British government was taking control of the Indian, from EIC directly under them. Why? You can talk about how. So War of Independence happened after this. You guys can mention War of Independence over here, but since we've not studied War of Independence right now, um, let's just go through the other reasons. But once we go through that topic, you can always tackle this question as per the timeline. Because War of Independence was this huge uprising that took place in India in the early 1850s, 1750s, 1850s, just because the Indians were so done with this tyranny of the British government, they started uprising for their rights. And the British government, when they saw all of this happening, they took control of from EIC. So you guys can mention that. Otherwise, you can talk about um, how EIC, the profits of EIC had increased so much. I'm reading from the third reason here. That the British government thought it was not right to leave this amount of wealth with just trading company. And this sort of took control from it. Other than that, you can also say that the Russians, they also um, wanted the control of, so British and Russians, they both wanted the control of Afghanistan at that time. And there was a threat of Russian expansion. And the British, they wanted to secure the Afghan lands before the Russians could do that. So the British government thought that it was not wise to leave all of these affairs with EIC, and they directly interfered. So this could be another reason. Why were the British able to conquer India? This one you will be talking about how easy it was for the British to take control of India. What were the reasons that pushed the British? Not pushed them, but made it easier for them to take control. Maybe some of the factors of the Indians, for example, their disunity, the no match of technology, um, or the weaknesses or the British strength. You guys can talk about any of these reasons. You can mention the Industrial Revolution, that the British had just went through an Industrial Revolution. They had latest weaponry, new technology. It was easier for them to take control. You can talk about how the Battle of Plassey, Battle of Buxar were these two examples where the Indians, military leaders, were bribed very easily. Nawab Siraj-ud-Daulah was defeated. Mir Jafar was basically the military commander of Nawab Siraj-ud-Daulah's troops, and he was bribed by the British government against the ownership of Bengal, and he leaked out all the war tactics, and hence the Indians were defeated. This shows how disunited the Indians were, how disloyal they were to their own armies, to their own people. You
Sir,
can.
your voice is very low.
Oh, sorry. Is it fine now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Then you can also talk about Indian weaknesses, undeniable army. You can talk about lack of planning of the Indians, the, the kind of weaponry they had and how it made so easier for the British to take control. So any three reasons, guys, maybe of the Indian weaknesses or the British strengths, all of these factors combined made it easier for the British to take over. Okay. Then there are certain reasons for why the British annexed Sindh. This is the annexation of Sindh that we were earlier talking about when we discussed Ranjit Singh in the last lecture. Guys, just go over this reason. Read through it. I'm giving you guys 2, 3 minutes to quickly read this answer. All right, guys. Any questions from this?
No, sir.
No? This is just about the British expansion in the province of Sindh, and this is very similar to how they were trying to gradually expand over different provinces. Okay. Robert Clive was appointed as the first governor of Bengal. Why? We're talking about the Battle of Plassey of 1756. Robert Clive was the British governor who was
Sir, your voice is low again.
okay, sorry. So Robert Clive was the British governor who was leading the British army in the Battle of Plassey, and he was a very um skillful commander in chief. And due to his um leadership, it was so easy for the British to win that battle, and even the Battle of Buxar. So Robert Clive was made the first governor of Bengal. Why? Because the first reason is that the Battle of Plassey, that he was so successful in that. Mir Jafar was the Indian army chief. He was bribed so easily, and that became a reason for, um, Robert Clive sort of defeating the Indian army so easily. Then Battle of Buxar of 1764. Mir Qasim, Shah Alam II, Nawab of Oud, these three leaders, they combined their forces. Even then, Robert Clive was able to win that battle. The last one is his skills, his efficient leadership, his efficient administrative capabilities that made him a perfect fit for um, the governor of Bengal. All right. So uh, now the railways of 19th century, the British had started laying down different transportation networks after they had taken control, like the railway networks, and so it was very much needed because they had to transport troops from one place to the other, raw material, people. So, all of these reasons um, were why the railways became so important. And This entire system was laid down in the subcontinent. The present-day railway networks in Pakistan and India both are the ones that were laid by the British government in the 19th century. Okay, as you can read through these three reasons as well. Then, this last question is a 14-mark response about um, British taking over the subcontinent between 1750 and 1850. You guys will be talking about this first reason that's written in the question. Was the Industrial Revolution the most important reason why British were able to take control of India between 1750 and 1850? Explain your answer. So you're going to start writing from Industrial Revolution onwards to six other reasons as to why it was so easy for the British to take control. And for those six reasons, you can write anything. You can write about the Doctrine of Lapse, this policy that was a reason why the British took control. You can talk about the subsidiary alliance. Subsidiary alliance was basically that if a ruler um, of a land um, wanted to keep an army to sort of protect their own lands, they were not allowed to do that. British would provide protection to the land of rulers against a payment that they were taking. Now, this was so unfair. Um, because the British were trying to take the control directly under them. Educational policies of Macaulay, the ones we were talking about earlier, westernization of Indian schools, English becoming the official language of India. So, this was another step to westernization of the subcontinent. Lack of unity within the Indians, the administrative system that was now under the British control, military expertise of the British, all of these reasons, like combined, made it easier for the British to take control. Now, for this kind of a response, you will be writing the first reason that's mentioned in the question statement, and then six other reasons to explain your answer. Six other points in six paragraphs, and then one evaluation at the end. Your evaluation will be your agreement to whether industrial revolution was the most important reason, or if you think any other reason was the most important, you need to maybe explain in 2 to 3 lines in your evaluation that why you think that particular reason was the most important and not the industrial revolution. Yes, does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Um, so you guys can take screenshots of this right now. I'll just scroll down gradually. The first three reasons, see, because we'll be attempting this now. Let me know once you've taken the screenshot, guys. The first one, are we done?
Yes. Sir.
Okay, here now. Done.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Yes.
Okay, this one, last reason. And we'll end the recording here as well. So this lecture was about the British expansion in the subcontinent, the reasons for expansion, and the reasons why it became so easier for them to expand the subcontinent. Indian weaknesses combined with the British strengths and all of these policies that were being introduced to take control of the lands of the subcontinent. Onwards from here, the discussion would be over how successful the British were, if they were successful, and kind of rebellion they had to face from the Indian side, the uprisings, and then onwards to the War of Independence, the full-fledged war that happened in the subcontinent against the British government. That is pretty much it for this lesson, guys. We are starting off with the assignment. Let me just switch off the